Okay. So good evening, everyone. To those who are here and to those who are virtually watching the recording. Um, this is the COE817 Network Security Midterm Study Hall, hosted by yours truly. And in today's study hall, we're going to go through a lot of different kinds of questions that I've kind of found, and some have been generated by AI, like with the help of a few of my friends. If you have any questions during the study hall for regarding anything, feel free to use the study hall chat, where one of my friends has posted a meme of a cat. I will be keeping an eye on it. If you don't want to use your voice, that's the option, and I'll regularly check in with everyone to see if there's any questions or if there's anything that you guys need clarification on. Um, but yeah, so if there's no questions, we will get started. All right, no questions. Sick. So just to quickly give a summary, we'll have true and false questions, then we'll move into some multiple choice, and then we'll end off with some long answers. So, all right, we will start. First true and false question. Symmetric encryption uses same key for both encryption and decryption. This just means that when a user is sending data out to their destination, that they encrypt using a key, like let's call it KS, and then the same key is used by the destination to decrypt that same key. Symmetric is the definition of both source and destination using the same key. Therefore, this statement is true. This next one is more of another theoretical question. DES uses a 56-bit block size and a 64-bit key. So it is a word on kind of numbers. It's a play on numbers, sorry. So 64-bit key is incorrect, as it uses a 64-bit block size and a 56-bit key. That's kind of like just to try to confuse you, so make sure it's a 64-bit block size and a 56-bit key. So this statement is false. All right, next question. The Feistel cipher structures guarantees invertibility, meaning that encrypted data can always be decrypted. This statement is true. As you can think of this in a way, one of my friends kind of explained it like a Rubik's Cube. A Feistel cipher is like a 16 combination move that you do. But you all can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
Okay. So just to clarify, that's my iPad that's muted. That's fine. Um, so to clarify, that the Feistel cipher is like a combination of moves or encrypted patterns that are executed on a block or a data set, and you can invert that kind of stream of encryptions to decrypt that same data. Therefore, the statement is also true. Question 4. For end-to-end encryption, manual delivery of keys is awkward because a host may need to exchange data with many other hosts. This question is basically saying that when you're like for one, manual delivery of keys means that you're sending over, like let's say in the first question we had that the symmetric encrypted key for your destination system to be able to account for this, or like to see or to decrypt your data, they need that same key. You have to manually deliver that key, and this question is basically saying that it becomes awkward in a way, and that is true. So it's just because for one, it like the scale becomes hard because you have to deliver over. So that's link encryption. End-to-end encryption, you're delivering just to the destination, and it becomes awkward because
I
it
can
is
still
not.
hear you. You're good.
All right. It is not. Sorry. Okay. Manual delivery of keys is awkward because it does not scale because each communicating pair needs a shared key. So they each need it, and therefore, just remember it is awkward. Symmetric encryption is a form of cryptosystem in which encryption and decryption are performed using different keys. As stated in a previous question, symmetric encryption uses the same key, making the statement false. In RSA, a message is encrypted using the recipient's private key. So you have the sender, you have the recipient. In a way, you know that you have your own private key, and you only have R's public key. So you have public key of R. You don't have the private key. The private key it resides within R itself. You don't have access to it. Therefore, the recipient's private key would be incorrect, making the statement false. Sorry. Okay, so frequent key exchanges are desirable to limit the amount of data compromised if an attacker learns the key. This statement is true, as if you keep changing, it's like changing your passwords on your email account. If you keep changing it, if someone else has access to it, they will get kicked out at the whenever you make that change in your password. Think of it like in that kind of same way. So a CA or certificate authority signs the user's public key using public key certificate using the CA's own public key. The statement is kind of a word play on words again. The CA signs using its private key, and everyone verifies using CA's public key. So it doesn't make it. So this part of the statement is false. Therefore, it makes this question false. Question 9. A nonce is a value that is used only once and is primarily used to ensure freshness in a protocol. This statement is true, as you add a nonce to any of your messages, kind of like how we did it in, I think it was Lab 2, where we learned about nonces and how to effectively use them to make sure that there's no replay attack possible. Question 10. In link encryption, each node decrypts the data incoming. Sorry, each node decrypts the incoming data and re-encrypts it before forwarding to the next node. This value is also, so this question is true. So you can think of it in a way, you have multiple hops to get to your destination. Let's say this is you. Whenever you send any information to the next party, you encrypt it with their public key, or if this is a shared pool, with the destination's public key, and you have to encrypt it for each stage to ensure that there is no third party or eavesdropper trying to listen onto your connections. So each kind of message has to be encrypted, and then decrypted when it gets to its destination, and then encrypted again, decrypted, and therefore this statement is true. Okay, no questions in chat. If there's any questions so far, let me know. For any questions up here. If not, then we shall continue. Okay, question 11. Session keys. Yep.
Go over question 7 again. The CA question.
Question 8, you mean?
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah. This is kind of something that you just have to kind of memorize. That the question states that the certificate authority signs the user's public key certificate using the CA's own public key. Well, this statement is not true, because the CA would give others its public key, right? So the CA would give its public key to its recipients or its other parties, and then the CA would sign the user's public key with its own private key. So there should be private key instead of public key. That's what's false in this statement. If this said private key, that would make the statement correct. All good?
Going to that same question, I guess it kind of makes sense, because when you do signatures, you do it with your own private key, right? So I guess we can kind of
Always.
assume the answer from that.
Yeah, because you don't want to give your private key out. Private key is just for yourself. You share your public key so that the people that you want your messages to decrypt can decrypt your messages that have been encrypted with your own private key.
Right.
All right. Moving on. Question number 11. Session keys are long-term keys shared between a client and server for years. This statement is false. It is also not long-term, it's short-term. And basically, session keys are, let's say you want to grab a bunch of files from a server, for example, then you would have you would get a session key from either like a Kerberos method or a KDC, and through that you will communicate with the server until you get the information that you have requested. And once you get that, that session key needs to get renewed or it will change. The authority, whoever is in charge here, either the Kerberos server or the KDC, will manage that change. I'm making this statement false. Okay, next question. Kerberos supports single sign-on, allowing a user's password to be entered only once, even when accessing multiple servers. This statement is true. Just to give everyone who might not have seen what Kerberos looks like, this is what Kerberos kind of entails. The last question that I just read is referring to this one kind of interface, right? So like the user logs in once per logon session. Once it logs on, once it requests its first key, for any other communication that needs to be made with the Kerberos system or the authentication server, you don't need to log on again. You just have to start requesting keys as it does here, and you will get back the ticket and the session key respectively for the action that needs to be performed. Making this statement true, you only need to sign on once before moving on. And the ticket granting ticket will, once you obtain that, you don't need to enter your password again. That's the actual definition. In a unilateral authentication protocol, both the client and the server verify each other's identity. Uni, like the word uni, means one. Unilateral authentication is only a one-sided authentication. Therefore, this statement is false. This statement would have been true if instead of unilateral, it would have been multilateral. This would have made that statement valid. Okay.
They call
14.
it mutual authentication protocol.
You're right.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. Thanks for correcting. So I'm thinking of another course. My bad there. Okay. Question 14. SHA-1 and MD5 are examples of hash functions used to generate message digests. This is true. Although some of these are a little bit out of date, I think SHA-1 is out of date. MD5 should be fine. There are still functions that are used to generate message digests. And question 15. Each user must share a unique secret key with the KDC, or Key Distribution Center, for symmetric key distribution. This statement is true. So in KDC-based systems, each principal shares a unique long-term key with the KDC, and it uses that to communicate and verify that it is the one communicating with that with the KDC. Okay. All right. Next section, we have some multiple choice. I think there's about 30 questions. We'll breeze a little bit faster through these as well, so we can spend a lot of our time on the long answers. In DES, how many subkeys are generated from the original 56-bit effective key, and what is the length of each subkey? So this one, the number of subkeys in DES is always 16. So that's what we're looking for, 16 subkeys. The other two statements are false. And we know that, well, this is kind of something to know. I'm not sure how to prove it, but each of the bits within that subkey are 48 bits, therefore making B the correct answer. Okay. In Feisal cipher, around the first half of the block L is updated by. This is kind of like something that is also theory based. It is updated by replacing L with the previous round's right half without any modification. So we have done the left half of the cipher, or left half of the cipher round, and then we have to go to the right half, but making sure that there's no modifications made to it. In DES, function f gives a 6-bit SBox input, which bits determine the row index and which determine the column index. This is just also something that needs to be known. The outer bits. So we have 6 bits. So if you think of it as like a sequence, so the outer bits are the ones that are used to determine the column index. In this case, making it option C. Okay. 1 and 6 select the row, and then 2 and 5 the inner data points select the columns. In RSA, ciphertext C is produced as C equals m to the power e. So this is m to the power e mod of n, which operation correctly recovers the plain text of m. So one thing to note here is that you always look for the same mod value. So it's, in this case, it's mod n. You always have the same mod value. That does not change. In this, we see all the mod values are different. Only one with mod n is this last one. Therefore, it's D. Okay, another interesting question. The RSA private key D and public key E satisfy which mathematical relationship, given that this phi of n is equal to p minus 1 times q minus 1. So to look at this, when you multiply the two, that's where the encryption in this case comes in. This has to do with these prime numbers p and q, and when they're multiplied, that's kind of what you're looking at. So it's always e times d in a question like this for RSA, and the reason why we do mod of n inside is not quite clear for me, but the answer is B, where e times d is equal to 1 mod n and 1 mod phi of n. So you're taking the mod of this this function. The security of RSA depends on the computational difficulty of which mathematical operation. As seen in the previous question, we can see that it relies on the computation of p and q, which are large prime numbers, and in this case, the answer will be C, as it is difficult to factor these two values without knowing the prime numbers themselves. As when you multiply two prime numbers, determining the origin is quite challenging. For the Caesar cipher with shift K, which expression correctly decrypts ciphertext characters C back to plain text P? So initially, just to clarify, Caesar cipher is a shift of K values. So if you have A as your character that you're trying to use, a shift of K equals, like, let's call it 3. And then you would just jump 3 points. So 1, 2, 3, B, C, D. So your value would be D in this case. That will be your new value or new character that signifies that you're trying to use A in your ciphertext. To revert, I would have thought, like, initially it would have just been C minus K. But the reason we do plus 26 and that being our answer is to prevent any negatives from appearing within the mod function. So just to prevent any miscommunication occurring, we add that 26 and then we perform the mod and find the remainder. Okay. Next question. A network of n equals 20 hosts each need to securely communicate with every other host using symmetric encryption. How many unique pairwise keys are required? So there's a function that's used in this calculation. The function, or like the calculation method, is multiplying n times n minus 1 because you need to communicate with everyone except yourself, and you divide that value by 2, as you need 1 key per communication between, let's say, person A and person B. And this value, if we were to sub in 20 over 2, this will give us 190. Therefore, that's our answer. A nonce is included in authentication protocol message primarily to provide which security property? Confidentiality? No, it's not this. It's not non-repudiation? No. It is freshness. So a nonce is a random value, whether it be a timestamp or whether it be a sequence number, anything. It is a value that is determined by the sender, and it is used to ensure that the messages that are being communicated are always fresh and there is no replay attack. Which of the following statements is true about the KDC-based system? For this one, session keys are stored permanently by the KDC for auditing purposes. No, as that is a security risk. Compromising the master key does not affect past session key security. This is also incorrect. Session keys limit the damage of a master key compromise to previously distributed session keys. So it is true. You want to always prevent the compromise in case master key is like sent out or leaked by any chance. Session keys are still valid, and using 2 keys in this method prevent any prevent that immediate layer of compromise. A relying party verifies a user's public key certificate using the user's private key, the CA's private key, a shared symmetric key between the user and the CA. That's what's stated here, and the CA's public key. So once again, we had a similar question where we have the CA's public key but not its private key. The user's private key, we don't have that user's private key. And a shared symmetric key, we're not using that here because we have its public key certificate. Therefore, we have to use the CA's public key. So it's option D. Okay. So which of the following is not a feature of public key certificate scheme? Any participant can read the certificate to obtain the owner's public key. This is not true. I'll just read through. So public key certificate scheme in this kind of verifies that certificates are issued by the and updated by the CA, but you don't need the CA's involvement when you want to communicate with them directly. So here the answer would be D. Bob receives a message M and digital signature S from Alice. To verify the signature, Bob should do what? So here, in this case, remember Bob will have Alice's public key and not Alice's private key. So what it will do is it will decrypt with not Alice's private key. It will be Alice's public key. It's one of these 2 options. And since we're talking about message M, so what is this? Sorry. So it will decrypt with Alice's public key and then compare itself with the hash of M. So it will take a hash of that and verify that if these 2 values are identical, then I can prove that this communication is valid, and Bob or Alice proves herself to Bob in this case.
Yo, Krish, I have a question.
Yo.
So like when it says digital signature S, right? Does that
Yep.
just mean public key? Like I'm kind of confused. Like, how does this work? Like, could you draw it out or something?
Like, I mean, one of the questions that we'll do, like the long answer ones, kind of goes through it. Digital signature in this case is referring to the final kind of message output that Alice produces. Not the message, but like, one sec.
Are you gonna go through it after, like in the long answer?
Like, one of them will include like the communication on how this occurs, so we can go through it then in more depth. But as of like for this question, you're just trying to verify that within the signature, Alice is gonna include the hash of M, as that is going to be sent through. And when you decrypt the signature with Alice's public key, you end up getting the value of her signature, like her digital signature, like that value included in with this hash value of the message that's being sent. And so if that value includes the hash of M, the signature, if it includes the hash of M, then in a way that just verifies that signature that it is true and it is from Alice.
Okay.
If that makes
Thanks.
sense. I'll explain it again like
A
when
bit.
we get to the long answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Which pair of algorithms is used to use as cryptographic hash functions to produce message digests? We also did this question earlier in the MCQs. And sorry, true false. It is MD5 and SHA-1. Okay. Getting into some theory. In the Kerberos authentication system, which is a primary purpose of the ticket granting service. So the primary function of a ticket granting service is to allow clients to obtain service tickets for individual servers without re-entering their password, as it's kind of like a one-time login or single sign-on SSO. If some of you might have used it at school or at work, that's kind of the same purpose of what Kerberos is trying to allow users to do in this case. Why is Kerberos more convenient than a system where TGS is eliminated and the client authenticates directly to the AS for every server it wishes to access? Once again, carrying on from the previous question, Kerberos with TGS allows single sign-on. The password is entered once across, even across multiple server sessions, as the Kerberos authentication system or server will be managing these tickets to authenticate you and the server together, or to allow you to communicate. Okay. The public key 3-pass mutual authentication protocol. Why does A include B's identity inside the signed portion of message 2? This is relaying to a diagram, I believe. It's up here somewhere. Okay, I'm not sure where that's referring to. But when we refer to the 3-pass mutual authentication protocol, it's like when it's for the mutual authentication between you and the person that you're communicating with. And in the second message that is being sent, you have to include the opposite person's signed portion of their message to prove to the other person that I am who you think I am, and you have sent me that previous message, and now I'm verifying that I am who I am to you. So the answer to this is, and it also prevents an intruder or a man in the middle from redirecting A's message to a different recipient. So just for the securing to make sure that I am who I'm communicating with. I'm communicating with who I had intended to send my first message. Relaying to the next question, in the same 3-pass mutual authentication protocol, can an intruder reply A's message number 2 from a previous session to get authenticated by B in a new session? In this question, since in this mutual authentication protocol you use nonces, each message is going to have a new nonce or new like random generated value, and since it will contain the old RB, so the key or the message that was sent by B, it won't be possible for an intruder to kind of perform this replay attack. The protocol 1, where Alice sends her ID to the server. The server sends a nonce back to Alice. Alice encrypts it with encrypts it using its shared key between the server, the nonce that it shared, and this kind of communication that we're talking about, or this is what's demonstrated here, is basically Alice proving herself to the server, but the server has not proved itself to Alice, and that is what's known as unilateral authentication. For the protocol above, this one again, there's no pre-context. But for the protocol above, what is the key remaining security vulnerability after replay attacks have been addressed? The key remaining security vulnerability is that Alice wouldn't be able to verify that an entity that sent the nonce is a legitimate server, and it could be spoofed or it could be impersonated. So that is the remaining vulnerability that still persists. Question 21. Public key cryptography is used for key distribution in two fundamentally different ways. Which pair below correctly represents both use cases, or both uses? So encrypting data directly and signing the data to prevent tampering? No. As if you encrypt it and then sign it, it can still be tampered with. If you still have the decryption key. Distributing public keys themselves, your certificates, and then using public key encryption to securely deliver symmetric session keys. So this is what public key cryptography is referring to in this question. And the public keys are distributed using certificates, and they're done to get a hold of their symmetric session keys that they require to communicate for that session period. An attacker silently copies packets traveling between Alice and Bob without altering them. This is an example of which security attack. Modification, it says without altering, so it doesn't modify. Fabrication, it's not creating any new packets or messages, so it's not fabrication. Interception, an attack on confidentiality. So this is what this question is stating, as it's not affecting the availability of the communication either. It's just kind of snooping. It's like it's kind of like stalking someone's Instagram page in a way, where you're just kind of trying to see what they're posting, but not really like doing or not interrupting or not affecting them in any particular way. You're just gathering information. Question 23. In a KDC-based distribution protocol, the use of hierarchy of keys means what? So using hierarchy keys basically kind of signifies what key takes what priority over another. So in this particular question, we always kind of look for something related to the master or the session key, right? As those are within the hierarchy, as they take most effect. So master keys are always protected. Always protect distribution of the short-term keys. That is kind of a way to think of it. So first is, and there's a few others, and I think number 5 down here, 4 or 5, is session key. So whatever is up above can help encrypt whatever is below to share or to authenticate with someone else. In this question, if we look at option number B, so a long-term master key is used only to securely deliver short-lived session keys. So that abides by the rule of using something higher up the hierarchy to encrypt something that is lower down. In the KDC protocol studied in class, if an attacker replays KDC's message number 5 to B in a new session, why does the attack fail? Once again, we don't have any context about the question that it's referring to, but we can say that replay attacks is what this question was referring to. It's detected because the nonce of A is a fresh per session, and A replay that message that carries an old nonce that was produced by A that will not match the current run, which results in this being option B. So B compares that the nonce of A inside the replayed message against the nonce of A that was sent in the current session, and since they don't match, B will reject that communication. Which of the following correctly contrasts link encryption with end-to-end encryption? So link encryption was what I said earlier, with like your source having to go through multiple links before it gets to its destination, whereas end-to-end is where you are directly connected with your destination. So in this one, in link encryption, plaintext is exposed at each immediate node. In end-to-end encryption, it is never exposed to intermediate nodes. So the encryption happens, or the decryption and encryption happens at each stage in between. Therefore, it makes this kind of communication a little bit unsecure, as let's say if source is trying to send some important information, a password or a key, over to destination, each of the neighbors, each of the nodes in between will always be able to see that and take it out if they want to, if they're an attacker. And that's what differentiates both link and end-to-end. Sorry, one sec. Okay. A typical symmetric block cipher processes data in fixed block sizes of what size? Once again, this is one of the questions that we had done earlier. Block size is always 64 bits. The key size is 56 bits, but since we're asked about block size, always 64. Question 27. A simple key distribution protocol A to B, where the public key is sent along with its ID. So A sends its public key and its ID. B responds by encrypting its public key with the session key that is shared between A and B. This process of communication is vulnerable to MITM, or man in the middle attacks, primarily because what reason? So here we see that since IDA is transmitted in plain text, allowing the attacker to impersonate A, that is something that can happen, but that doesn't really incur man in the middle as much. There's no authentication to this public key, right? We see that there's no encryption that was done on it. There is no like big E that's put in front of it or encrypted anyway. Basically states that anyone can gain access to that public key, and then whenever in the future A transmits any encrypted messages with its private key, PR. Let me put that up here. Encrypted with its private key of A. Sorry about that. Okay, encrypted with its private key of A, with whatever message that it wants to send. If an attacker gets this message, right, that attacker can decrypt it with the private key or the public key that was initially transmitted by A without any encryption. So in this one, the answer is B. Number 28. A basic key management protocol sends Alice to Bob, encrypted public key of B with a message A. To fix both the identity and replay vulnerabilities, Alice should modify the message to include what? In this case, it should also include a digital signature and a timestamp, because the replay attacks are vulnerable, since in this statement there's only a public key that is used to encrypt. If we also included a nonce value or a timestamp inside of it, that would assist with the preventative attack prevention against a replay attack. That's what I'm trying to say. 29. In the context of network security, an equity assessment most accurately refers to what? So an An equity assessment most accurately refers to an evaluation of whether security policies and controls treat all groups of users fairly without discrimination. Equity and discrimination are kind of go hand in hand, and that's kind of the link that you're trying to find with this kind of question. Under the cybersecurity legal frameworks, illegal interception specifically refers to what? It refers to intentionally intercepting by technical means any non-public transmission from or within a computer system. So you're obtaining information that you shouldn't publicly have access to, which you are gaining and intercepting and accessing. Therefore, it is illegal under the cybersecurity legal frameworks. And so that is all for the true and false and multiple choice. Any questions so far from anything above that we have discussed?
Go back to question 24. You put B, right?
24B, yeah.
Okay, okay.
That's what you were thinking, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we'll start with long answers in just a minute. I'm gonna get some water. I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back. And we shall continue with these questions. So there will be a total of, I think, 7 or 8 long answers that we'll be going through. Hopefully, these are the ones that the prof posted in the 2026 midterm study guide. And yep, so we'll go through all of them to verify that hopefully everything makes sense. Starting with question 3. Two parties, Alice and Bob, use the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol to establish a shared secret over an insecure network. So part A is describe how a man-in-the-middle attacker can successfully attack this protocol, show the modified message flow, and explain how the keys are established. So if in this case a man-in-the-middle exists during the encryption of, during the secret kind of creation phase, we can demonstrate this in a simple way. So we have Alice. We have, let's call this person in the middle Drew. and we have Bob. So Drew is our intruder. So this is a person that shouldn't gain access to said information, but they will due to a sequence of data transmissions that they will interfere and grab a hold of. First thing that is sent over, Alice will be, let's in this case we start with Alice initiating this communication. Any message sent by Alice, Drew is going to just grab that before Bob receives anything, and what it will include a function or a message that is encrypted or that is created with this kind of method. So in this case, G of A modded with a common value, let's call that N. Um, this function is to just give it a value. So this is A that is sent from Alice but intercepted by Drew. Then Drew impersonating Alice towards Bob will be like, okay, I'm now Alice, but Bob doesn't necessarily know that. So let's call this Z or D in this case, since we have Drew. Then this equals G of D modded with that same N value as we have earlier. And Bob thinking, oh, this is Alice. Let's communicate back with her with our key exchange. So let's call this B equals G of D modded with N. And then Drew, once again impersonating Bob for Alice, will be like, okay, so this is this will be like, okay, so I'm Bob to Alice, but we still use the same kind of message that is there, G of D mod of N. And here, just to kind of also understand these G values, so G equals any value that's decided by Alice or Bob or whoever the initiating party is in this case. Um, yeah. And so A, D, B are the respective values that Alice, Drew, and Bob send to the outgoing party. And so this is how Drew, like as per the questions asking, this is how Drew would successfully attack Alice and Bob's communication and interfere with their messages and, let's say, extract data or whatever Drew's purpose in this question is.
I just had a quick question.
Yep.
So when T sends the messages, right? Wouldn't okay, never mind. I got it. All right.
You good?
Yeah, I just got confused with you're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So that was part A. Part B. Propose and explain a secure revision to the protocol that prevents the man-in-the-middle attack. To prevent the man-in-the-middle attack, you can do one of a few things. Primarily, as what the prof wants, you would encrypt or you would attach digital signature. So A's digital signature. Well, to message A. So it would be, so here you would initially add a digital signature, which is a string of a string of like either hex or decimal values that signify that I am who I am. So I am Alice. That kind of just goes to show that when it's sending any outgoing messages. And same thing with B. So if we were to do the same values like B's digital signature to message B, and we would have the same kind of going back when Bob is sending the messages out back to Drew, to the insecure network. Okay.
I have a question
Next.
about that same question.
Yep.
So for A, the lowercase a and d and b represent their like private keys, right?
They're private values, yeah. That they're creating this message, the A mess. So A, the capital A. Just to clarify, these are the messages that are being transmitted, and the G is a common value that is used. A is the private value that the Alice, and B, the lowercase b, is the private value that Bob uses to create that, like the capital A, capital B messages that are being transmitted.
And then don't they also establish like secret keys? Like I think I read in the notes, lecture notes that for example, let's say Alice, right? Alice would derive a secret key using I guess in this case D, since Drew interfered and it sent a message back. So then the secret key would be like um, A to the power of D mod N, something like that. Like, is that like well how the keys are established? The secret keys are established in this case.
Like you mean the back and forth secret key? Like when like, so sorry, just to clarify, when Drew sends this back to Alice, you're
Yeah.
saying how does Alice they take in this data? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so they take in that data and then they create a secret key that's only
Yeah.
known to them. And like I think they use that key in order to like decrypt messages that come from Drew. Uh it's supposed to get it's supposed to create the secret key based off of B, but in this case it's only creating off of D, right?
In this case, it's only creating off a D because Alice doesn't know that Drew isn't Bob. So the outcome effect of what you're saying is something. If I'm correct, let me know. So like the final key that is generated, it would be A to the power of D in this case, mod of N. Is something what you saw?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And
And
then
then B would do the exact same thing.
and D would do the exact same thing. I mean, that would have happened up here, right? So in this case, actually no, on the reverse effect. Yeah, but this is the value, and it's also equal to, I think, G, like lowercase g of A and D mod of N. Apparently, I
Yeah.
believe that's kind of how it's also laid out.
Yeah, they're both equivalent. And then
Yeah,
on Bob it's like the same thing. Like it's K is equal to B to the power of D mod N.
B to the power of D mod of N. Yeah, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just had like a question about um like question 11 from like multiple choice.
multiple choice question 11.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Oh. Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, so the answer is D, right? Because it's like
Yep.
you need the public key. Okay, makes
So
sense.
you always
Sorry.
you never have private keys. You always only have
Yeah.
the corresponding parties and their public keys.
Okay, yeah, yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. So question 4. Alice wants to authenticate herself to a server. They share a pre-shared key KAS that is established during her registration. The protocol steps are: it sends ID, it sends nonce, server sends nonce. Alice sends the encrypted value of the shared key that they have, and the nonce value that the server sent to Alice. And server decrypts the message using KAS. If the results match the NS in step 2, the server considers Alice authenticated. Based on the protocol above, answer the following. So for part 1, is this mutual authentication protocol or unilateral authentication protocol? Explain your reasonings. So as we know from the previous one of the multiple choice questions, mutual authentication protocol is when both Alice and the server have authenticated each other. In this case, server is the only one to decrypt the message, and it just verifies that what was sent in step 2. And if it verifies that, then Alice is authenticated. But in the sequence provided, since we don't have Alice verifying the server, we consider this this communication as unilateral. Does this protocol successfully deal with replay attacks? If so, explain the mechanism. This question, so this sequence of steps does deal with replay attacks, as we have these nonce value. So yes, it does deal with with replay attacks, because server initiates with a nonce value. Okay. And last but not least, part 3. Identify one remaining vulnerability in this protocol regarding the server's identity. So in this case, the server's identity can be spoofed initially because we don't have any message from server to Alice stating the server's ID. So Alice doesn't necessarily know what the server looks like or what its numbers are associated with. So server spoofing. So of the server's identity can occur because after Alice sends out this encrypted message, let's say if anyone else also has this encrypted key that is shared between Alice and server, gets that message, they don't know. I mean, this person, this like intruder, can communicate with Alice without Alice knowing that they're not communicating correctly or with the correct person. So hopefully that is clear. Just one sec. Also, MKX game, I don't know what you're referring to. Lecture 3? Because I don't see any diagram at the end of lecture 3. That's what I'm confused about. But we'll get back to that later. Okay. Next question. What are two different uses of public key cryptography related to key distribution? So we have one and two separate things. So public key cryptography, the first thing that we use it for is distribution of public keys. So whenever you want to transmit any public keys, you would have to use some cryptography related to it to encrypt it, as you don't want everyone who shouldn't have access to that key have it. And second statement would be Same kind of aspect, but instead of public keys, if we also have any shared symmetric keys. So when we want to distribute shared, we'd also have to decipher, encrypt that somehow to prevent those who shouldn't have access to that key to gain access. Okay. What are the features of using a public key certificate scheme? So I believe there are 4. I'm just going to read it off of the solutions. I don't fully remember this. So any participant can read a certificate to determine the name and public key of the certificate's owner. Let's pull it from here actually. So what it's referring to. Whoa. Not bad there. Okay. This is what the question answers. So any participant can read a certificate to determine the name and public key of the certificate's owner. Second feature is any participant can verify that the certificate originated from that certificate authority and it is not counterfeit. And only the certificate authority can create and update certificates. Any participant can verify the currency of the certificate. That's just a few of the values. Okay. So Calvin had a question in chat. What key do you use to encrypt a public key? A private key? Well, it's an encrypted algorithm that, like, whenever you initiate the RSA transmission, like whenever you have, I'll just write it here. So let's say if you have person A, B, when A sends something to B, if it wants to send its public key, it would encrypt it with encrypt that message with. Actually, you have a good point. Trying to verify from the prof's lecture if there's any information on that real quick.
Wouldn't it encrypt it with B's public key because it's trying to verify that B is receiving it? So someone with B's private key would only be able to decrypt that.
But I'm thinking of this in a way where it's like if this is the initial transmission, so if A doesn't have B's public key, what would they use to encrypt it, right? So I'm just checking. Initial transmission isn't always Diffie-Hellman. It can be that if that is the protocol that's being used. Also, I'm just checking. I don't see any like encryption of the public key. I think you just send it out in the open. And then when you're encrypting going forward, you encrypt using B's public key when you have it, so that only B can decrypt it. Like decrypt that message. So initially you can just send, so like you don't have to encrypt any messages, you just send your public key of A over, and then B would do the same. So B would also do the same, it will send public key of B. And then going forward, like let's say any messages that are to come in the future, so when A wants to transmit something, what it will do is it'll encrypt with its private key. Because B can decrypt that with with A's public key, and then it can also send another transmission of the encryption with B's public key. And then the message digest or whatever data that needs to be sent. This can be how it would make sense. I don't know if someone wants to verify. I think this would make sense as when B gets this message, it has A's public key already, so it can decrypt the first message. Therefore, this would go away. And since it's using B's public key, B would then use its private key to decrypt this to finally get access to this message block that exists.
Would it also work the other way if you encrypt the outer one with the
Yeah.
B's public key and then
Because
inner-
because B only has its private key. Actually, yeah. Either way would work realistically.
Yeah.
You're doing one before the other, vice versa. But does it matter? Like, I mean, in a way, I'm just trying to think of a way where it would matter whether you encrypt it first with public or first with your private key.
I can't think of one. I mean, either way, it's gonna have to.
It will
decrypt the
have to get through both stages anyways. Yeah, that's what I'm kind of getting to. But for now, I guess we can think of it in this universal way, where it can be this, or we can have the public key of B and the private key of A, and both messages, both are valid. Yeah. Okay. If there's no objections, I guess we'll stick with that. Okay. Question number 7. Okay. The Kerberos involves 3 two-message exchanges, one between the client and the authentication server, one between the client and the ticket granting service, and one between the client and the server or the service that is chosen by said client. Explain briefly in general terms the purpose of each of the 3 exchanges between the client and the AS, the client and the TGS, and the client and S. So if we were to put these in a way kind of like the prof does. So this is the authentication service or the authentication server as a whole. So let's call this AS. Within that, there's something called the TGS or the ticket granting service. And then you have your server anywhere else. Let's call this S. As client wanting to initiate communication with said service, we know that Kerberos is a method where one single initial verification occurs, and you can prove yourself or see the output or see through with communication with any service that it needs to. So the communication method that is chosen First message that client makes to AS entails one sec. I don't want to lead you guys in the wrong direction. Okay, so requests, the tickets, granting ticket. TGT is also a short form, ticket granting ticket. Then AS, or the authenticating service, will respond with the ticket that it requested, along with a session key. And then now it has that initiation that it can make with TGS. So here it is the same thing, requests ticket. Again, I'll just say TGT. Again, TGS responds with the ticket and the session key. And finally, after having all this information, it can request data or start communication. Service communication can commence. And then whatever server or whatever is requested from the server, it will provide details. Kind of how the prof lays it out in the lectures. This is for part A. For part B, why is Kerberos more convenient for human users than a system with in which the TGS is eliminated and the client makes a Kerberos style request to the AS for each server connection? This is, as kind of also explained, the whole purpose of Kerberos' system is to make it so that client only has to authenticate itself once with the authenticating service or the server, and after that it just will get as many tickets and it can communicate with the services as needed. So that's the reason. Kerberos is meant for SSO or single sign-on. If TGS is eliminated, client will need to authenticate itself every time for every session key. So like every time it wants to get a session key and communicate with a service, it will need to authenticate itself in every scenario. Whereas if TGS exists, once it has a session key to communicate, so once it has this communication key that it can start communicating with TGS, it will just have to communicate, request TGS, request TGT, get that session key to communicate with service, and it will communicate with the service until the session key expires or its tasks that it needs a service for are done, so it no longer needs that service or communicate with that service going forward. Hopefully that made sense. If there are any questions, ask away. Okay, seems to be good. Question number 8. Consider the following protocol designed to let A and B decide on a fresh shared session key, K prime of AB. We assume that they already share a master key, KAB, So here we see that initially, without any encryption, A sends its ID and its nonce to B. B then encrypts with that shared master key that it has, and encrypts nonce of A and the new session key that it wants to use to communicate with B on. And then going forward, A will use that same session key and provide the same nonce value to prove that, okay, I am who I am. So why would A, so the question is asking, why would A and B believe after the protocol ran that they share K prime B with the other party? You should explain both the reasons of A and B, so your answer should complete the sentences blank. So to answer this, so from A's perspective, we see that, I'm not going to write it all down, but we see that since it sent its nonce value, and since B sent over an encrypted message that entailed the master key that A already knows, as we know that we assume that they already share a master key. This is shared between A and B. So since A already has this, it's able to decrypt this message that was sent from B, grabbing hold of this inner value, proving that this nonce that was sent by A, it was resent by B to A to show that, okay, the message that you just sent or the request that you just sent, I'm responding to this. That's the purpose of the nonce, and then it uses that nonce to encrypt this. Sorry, it's not encrypting. My bad. It's sharing this nonce. This should be the double bar to concatenate, I believe. So and then you have this this new session key that K and that B wants to use with A. So that's from A's perspective. This was proven from B to A, and then now to prove that A has received the session key, what it does is that it just encrypts this message with that same session key, the new one that they wanted, with the same nonce value that they initially used to prove that, oh, I have received the message that you just sent me with a new session key. Here is a response with the same key that you, or the same nonce value that you already know, and it verifies that in this way. I'm not going to write all of that down, but hopefully that that made sense. And because, like in this way, the one key line from the solution I'm reading now is a key statement is that since both of these have KAB, therefore they're the only ones that can decrypt and validate the session key that's there. Therefore, there is no other kind of flaw that can be happening, or there's no miscommunication that occurs here. Okay. Moving on, if no questions. Okay. Question number 9. So describe the steps to generate a digital signature of a message given M. So let's call this block M. To encrypt it, or to generate a digital signature from it, you're going to apply a hashing algorithm that will then produce a message digest. So whatever message is included in this, as we discussed about above, either MD5 or SHA-1 will be used to hash this message into either, I believe it's a 3264 or 128 bit value in hexadecimal. So that will be this this message digest. And once this is gone through, then in this case, we say that whoever is the creator of this message digest will then encrypt it with said private key. Move this over to the left. Private key encryption. So it will pretty much do this, like encrypt with private key of, let's call this A, and it will include the message digest. This is the, I guess, in the function method. This will provide with a signature. We'll just say signed. Signed by A. So A signed this value, and what it will now do is that when it sends over this message, it will be like, to prove that I'm the one who sent this message, let's call this M with this statement, the signed value at the bottom, like kind of like how you sign your name at the bottom of a letter, and give it in a very similar way. And then kind of the other way around, assuming that the receiving party has the private key that was used to decrypt this, we have this whole message. Let's take this, duplicate that. So we have this message that is received on the receiver's end. What we will do is we will take this message. We will once again do a hashing algorithm, or perform a hash on it, getting a message digest, and using said signed key, or whatever was signed at the bottom, we're going to decrypt with public key. And since here we had encrypted the message digest with private key and got this signed and put it at the bottom, the signed value includes the message digest. Just needs to be, once it's decrypted, then we should get the same message digest. And if same, then verified. I think one participant asked a question in the beginning for digital signatures. This is kind of how digital signatures are formulated and then also verified. Hopefully that answered their question. Any questions about digital signatures or how verification happens? Okay. Okay. Moving on. Question 10. Explain man-in-the-middle attack in the following key distribution protocol. So in this case, kind of using the same example that we did above for one of the questions where we had man in the middle, we'll just take that example again. Oh, it's different. Okay. Just take these. Okay. So what we see here, let's call it Drew, the same same man in the middle again, and in this case we see Alice is sending over the public key and its ID concatenated over to Bob. Bob then encrypts a session key with A's public key, and then A has to use that to decrypt. A has to use his private key to decrypt that message. But how can a man in the middle interfere here is quite interesting. So initial message, we have the same as what's here. So we use PU of A and then IDA. Use a smaller pen. So ID of A. And then Drew, what we'll do is forward that message over to Bob, being like, yo, so I'm who you're communicating with, and it will just send over its public key. But since it has A's ID, it will send over ID of A. Because Bob thinks that it wants to communicate with with A, so therefore it's going to send in A's ID impersonating A, but it's using its public key, so only Drew can decrypt any messages that are using its public key. And going forward, what Bob will now do is that it wants to share that session key over to Alice, or who he thinks Alice is, and he will use the same encryption, but not knowing that this is not Alice's public key. It will use that same key to then encrypt the session key that it wants to share with Alice. And then going back, it's going to continue with that and use the same method to encrypt using public key of A, and it will use KS the same way that it was received from Bob. So in this case, this is how the communication between A and B, given what was up here, is or can be intervened by a man in the middle. So in a way, I think this is the next question, why is the protocol insecure against man in the middle? Before answering that, to prevent something like this from happening in the first place, what could have been done is that instead of sending the key right away, it could have sent over an encrypted message with B's public key. And so Alice would have gotten, or like in this case, even if Drew got that, they would not be able to, like any message that is meant for B wouldn't be interfered. But to answer part B in this question, why is the protocol insecure against man in the middle? This communication made above is not an authentication. So these would include either Diffie-Hellman, or it could be RSA, instead of whatever this would be called. I don't think it has a name. I think it's just what was used, but that's how we could prevent these man-in-the-middle attacks. Any question here?
Does this question assume that A knows B's public key beforehand?
I'm assuming not, because it's sending over ID initially, right? So if we assuming we don't know anything to start, unless the question states otherwise. That's kind of how one of my friends who graduated last year or did this course with Truman last year, he kind of did it. So assume you don't know anything until stated otherwise, and if you need to make any assumptions, make them, but always try to keep your answers short and to the point. Just some tips that I got from a colleague from before.
Thank you.
Okay, question number 11. We just have two more. This is this one and one more question after. Okay. So consider the following authentication protocol. So we have the public key 3-pass mutual authentication protocol that is sent. Here we have you have like a legend down. Sorry, a legend down here. Our B here is nonce generated by B when B communicates with A. Cert A is A's public key certificate. Okay, B is B's public key. Then, yeah, the rest of them are kind of just copy paste. Okay. And this would be private key. The -1 will be private keys, and without any exponent will be their public keys. So this is what it's going through. Let's just read the question. Given your reason in favor of that, having completed the protocol, A will believe that he is talking to B. To be honest, the question seems kind of vague. But if we kind of understand what's going on, B sends its nonce to A. A responds with its cert. It sends A's nonce. It sends B's nonce. It sends B. I'm guessing what B would just be like whatever B's digital signature is, and then it will encrypt with its own private key the contents of its nonce, B's nonce, and digital signature of B. And then B will verify that okay, it can decrypt it because it actually we don't know if B has A's public key in this case.
Oh, wouldn't it have it because in message 2, A uses its own private key in order to encrypt that last message, right?
Yeah, this
How would
part.
it be? Yeah.
Also the certificate, you can see the identity and the public key of the sender.
Oh wait, is this so like this is just the cert of A's public key, right? So what you're saying is that it
Yeah.
can use this to decrypt the message? Is that what you're saying?
No, not decrypt the message, but it'll have the public key, not the private key.
Also, your voice is really grainy. It's hard to hear you.
Right?
Yeah, Bernie, bro, your mic is actually horrible.
So I'm at the library, but since the certificate doesn't the certificate allow the receiver to see the public key?
I think what he's trying to say is that the certificate should contain A's public key, and then the certificate B should contain B's public key. So either way, it will know B will know A's public key, and
Yeah,
A will know B's public key because of that.
got it. Visible to be. Okay, there you go. So give your reason in favor of that. Having completed the protocol, A will believe that he is talking to B. So in this, after A received B's message number 3, it can verify that it's using or that it's communicating with B. I'm guessing.
Doesn't like the certificate just verify who you're talking to?
Yeah, it does. So, like in this case, I just verified with the notes is that cert A allows you to read A's public key, and hence you can decrypt the message that A is encrypting with its private key.
Yeah, so like for the answer, like A thinks it's talking to B because it's given B certificate, and certificate is like done by the CA or whatever, right? So it will
Yep.
because the
It's
certificate
a
contains
trusted
like
party. Yeah.
yeah, so is that not just the answer? Is given the certificate, so it knows like, all right.
Because
This
the
is
answer is
legit.
actually saying something else. I hadn't done this question because the answer is saying that A applies B's public key on another message that it transmits. So after this, it sends message number 4, which then sends encrypted KB. So B's public. Wait, I think they didn't need to do that. And then encrypting RB, RA, and then A. So this is what it's saying. Then it waits for this. Waits for the response of this, and then it verifies. But like the question doesn't really allow us to know this much, or it's not expecting us to do this. So.
Wouldn't it
Some
be
shit.
because in message 3, right? B, when it sends it to A, it encrypts it with its own private key. So then if A were to decrypt that, it would have to use B's public key, and if it receives the right nonce, which is like the nonces that it gives RA
It
and
sent.
RB,
Yeah.
then it knows that only someone with the correct private key could have encrypted that message, which is only B, since B only has access to that private key.
Yep.
I feel like that
Yeah.
probably makes
But
the
that
most
makes sense. But just like I was getting confused by the prof's solution on this question. So yeah, mutually, I think we agree on that statement where we have after message 3, we can see that, or A can see that B's public is used decrypt the message. Hence, it sees the nonces sent. This is what I'm guessing. Although it's different from the prof's answer, I'm thinking this is more valid based on the question. Actually, I mean, I'm just thinking of one thing. Are these sent in public or like without encryption? Because if they are, then how do we know? Actually, because it's encrypted with the private key. Never mind. Okay, we're good. Sorry for the confusion, but if anyone has questions, I think we can answer it. Okay. All good. Can an intruder replay A's message and get authenticated by B? Explain why. Nope. Since nonces are used, the intruder wouldn't have Okay. Question. A basic key management protocol only requires a single message. Alice to Bob encrypted with Bob's public key and the message M. This protocol has several points for attackers to attack, identify 2 weaknesses, and propose extensions to the protocol to fix these weaknesses. For your analysis, assume that Alice and Bob have access to trustworthy public key certificate servers. So, I guess answer number 1. So it's asking for two weaknesses and propose extensions to them. So since here it's an identity problem, so it can't verify that Alice sent the message since public key is open, right? So everyone has access to it. So since Bob doesn't know there's like Alice is the one to send it, since there was no digital signature or there was no information that is sent, that is one problem. So they can't verify each other in this case until the signatures are sent or there is an ID that's sent. I guess second problem is, of course, um, since there is no nonce value here, there can always be a replay attack. Yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Krish.
You're welcome. And yes, Mr. Unlucky, I will be sending the doc after this. But yeah, I can stay for like another few minutes. If anyone has any general questions about any other question, even not listed here, I can try to help work it through and help out. Um,
I had a question about question 3 that we discussed earlier.
the long answer or short answer one?
Yeah,
Or like
long answer. Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess what I was just trying to say is that you know how in the second part of part A it says show the modified message flow and explain how the keys are established. I was just trying to show how the keys are established. So is that correct or
I
like is
think this
there
is like when we have this key that we generated, like the K value, that is the establishment of said key. So I guess like that's what explains how they're established.
right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Krish.
Yeah, no worries, man.